Hello and welcome to this week's Opening Bell. I'm boxing news editor Tris Dixon, joined as always by Matt Christie. How's it going, Matt?
Yep, as always, going pretty well.
We had a pretty good weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it lived up to all expectation. It's not often you can say that in life or in boxing, is it?
Just to give some context, we were at the Carl Froch fight. So, yeah, it was an amazing night, wasn't it? It was a good night at the O2, really good atmosphere, cracking atmospheres. Not bad. There's a couple of good fights on there as well. And I suppose let's start, as the show went on, we'll start with Tony Bellew against Isaac Chilemba. Now, you've written the report for the magazine this week.
Yeah.
On Bellew Chilemba. What did you make of it? I mean, it was a better fight than the first time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't a classic, but it was. I mean, I've read different reports and seen different people's opinions since, and a lot of people didn't seem to enjoy it quite as much as I did on the night. But I think it was just because I was expecting it to be exceptionally drab again, and I think it wasn't that. I think for the first 6 rounds it was a relatively entertaining fight. Bellew was in control for 80% of the contest, I would say. Chilemba had his moments in the second half, but ultimately hats off to Tony Bellew. He didn't have to take that fight against a very, very awkward customer, and he came through it and he won convincingly.
You've spoken to Tony since the fight. I mean,
Yeah.
what's he had to say about his performance?
I think he was pleased with his performance. He said that he'd just been so exceptionally tired because he hasn't had a day out of the gym since Christmas, because obviously this was arranged 2 months. Well, this took place 2 months after, so of course it's straight back into training camp. I think he was a little bit aggrieved with some of the criticism he'd received, which he showed with his outburst on Sky after the fight for the first contest. But yeah, he said he's never met, and he doesn't want to meet anybody quite as awkward like that as Chilemba again.
Do you think he's ready for Chad Dawson, or the winner of Chad Dawson, Adonis Stevenson?
I wouldn't pick Bellew to beat either of those guys, to be honest. Well, Stevenson perhaps, maybe Stevenson, but I think if Dawson is the fighter he was prior to Andre Ward, I think he's just going to be too slick for Tony. But Tony is as motivated and as determined as any fighter in the country at the moment. He's almost in the mould of a Carl Froch with that determination and mental strength, and that really shouldn't be written off. So, yeah, if they're going to make it, if they can do it, and that's the next step, and it looks like it's going to be, I think now's the perfect time to do it.
Do you think Bellew's improved since the Cleverly fight?
Yeah, I think he has. He's had some decent tests since then, and I think the biggest measure of that improvement is Saturday night's performance, and the improvement just in 2 months. And I think Tony has proven himself now with that Cleverly performance and with the fights he's had since to certainly be comfortably in the world top 10, if not edging even further up.
Does this fight might make Chilemba a gatekeeper?
No, I don't know whether he's quite a gatekeeper yet. I think he's still kind of maybe fringe contender, but fringe contender and gatekeeper are often one in the same, aren't they?
There's only a couple of fights.
Yeah,
either way, splitting them.
yeah. But no, I still think he's on the other side. He's kind of 11 to 15 in the world, Chilemba. But he's one of those guys that, and he's only 26 as well. It'd be interesting to see if he can develop, and I think that he probably can.
Yeah. Okay. Who would you like to see Bellew fight next? I mean, there's talk obviously about Dawson Stevenson, with Bellew now being the WBC's number one. There's also the likes of Jean-Pascal, Lucien Boutte, who are fighting in December, January time. Any of those guys interest you, or do you think he's not quite ready for them? Who do you think he is ready for?
No, I think with Tony, I think he proved he did it against Cleverly. I don't think many of us thought he was ready for that, and he fought to that level, and he was nip and tuck that fight. I think the winner of Pascal Boutte would be, I think that'd be aesthetically at least a really good fight. I think it'd be really good to watch, perhaps more so than a Dawson Bellew fight. But from speaking to Tony, all he wants is to fight the best in the division now. He just wants to fight Dawson. He's not interested in anything else.
Do you think? I mean, him and Pascal, I think would be a terrific fight as long as it lasted, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
What about someone like Bebek Shubinov?
Yeah,
or Jurgen Bremer, someone like that.
Yeah, they're good tests. They're good tests, and they're. But I'd rather see him now in against Pascal, and or if he wants to take that route, just go for Dawson. Go for Dawson. If he was to lose to Dawson, then you've got all those other guys to aim at then. But I think now he's that determined. He's proven himself in an eliminator. Let's put him in there with the best, because that's what he wants.
It'd be interesting to see if he does get these big fights, if they can get him over here, or if he'll have to go on the road, wouldn't it? Because that's been shown, not least by Saturday's main event, that home advantage can really help a fighter.
Yeah, and a lot of guys in the Matchroom stable have shown that they're not afraid to go abroad to kind of chase their dreams. I'm sure Tony would have absolutely no fears about going over to USA to take on Chad Dawson. Whether Chad would come over here is a completely different matter.
Dawson showed he's not prepared to give away a few advantages in the fight
True.
against Andre Ward, didn't he? Not only went to Oakland, but he dropped down and wait for the fight as well.
Yeah, true. I'm not sure he'll be making that sort of mistake again in a hurry, though.
No, well, obviously he said in the magazine, I think was it last week, where he said, forget the idea of him fighting a super middleweight ever again, but that obviously frees him up to fight the likes of Tony Bellew.
Yeah, it does. But we're kind of discounting Adonis Stevenson here, and we've got he's an exclusive interview with Adonis in. It's a great name, isn't it, Adonis? We've got an exclusive interview with Adonis in the magazine this week, where he talks and he mentions potential fight, because he's moving up from super middleweight. He talks about Carl Froch. Chad Dawson also got some interesting views on Nathan Cleverly.
Yeah. Okay, so then next up after Tony Bellew, in terms of the TV portion of the show, which obviously neither of us have seen yet, George Groves came out and put on a really good display, didn't he, against Noe Gonzalez Alcoba.
Yeah. Well, it was. Yeah, he was. I think there was a period early on in the fight where he kind of got caught in a bit of silliness, but otherwise it was a really, really disciplined display, and his opponent, isn't like top 10 in the world, but at the same time, I sensed it was a step up for George, with the exception of James DeGale on the guys that he's fought before. He did really well, and what impressed me with George recently is just his patience as well, and the way he delivers his shots. The right hand, which did the business, was an exceptional punch. It really was.
The thing about George is he can still get drawn in, can't he? Certainly over the course of a long, hard 12-round fight, you'd figure that he would get drawn in at some stage. But I've got to say I was a little bit disappointed by Gonzalez. Now I know he'd only lost to Felix Sturm and Adonis Stevenson, wasn't it, in his previous big fights, but he'd gone the distance with Sturm and Stevenson's a punch. Now I don't want to take any credit away from George, because I thought he boxed very, very well. Very smart and disciplined. But I just thought Gonzalez, he could see that he wasn't as good a boxer as Groves and not as quick. His one chance would have been to jump on him, and he didn't.
No, it's true.
Then it's so much easier. It's so easier said than done. If you're getting picked off at range, the first thing that jumps through your mind isn't quick. Let's get in there and get hit by more.
And you never. I mean, they may have. I mean, I'm sure they did have a game plan, and it wasn't as if he was okay. I think he'd probably. I mean, I'm not sure how I'd scored it at that point, but I think he'd probably lost every round going into that. But it wasn't. He wasn't getting beaten up, was he?
No.
So maybe he was trying to take it into the second half of the fight and then test George's stamina or what have you. And it was just that right hand, because as the fight was going on, and I just presumed that to me it looked like it was going to be a shutout decision, a 12-round decision. It didn't look like George was going to stop him.
But then he picked the right shots and unlocked him.
Yeah.
So Groves, I mean, he mentioned fighting Carl Froch in this week's magazine. Actually, he said that he'd like to fight Froch, and he'd like to be the next guy in our panel. It won't be Froch. I mean, I spoke to Froch a couple of times this week. He said 100% it won't be George Groves. So let's discount Groves. I mean, let's discount Froch. So who do you think Groves should realistically go after?
Maybe Robert Stieglitz, something like that. Although I think there's still a big, with the exception of DeGale, who I would put in and around the world top 10, maybe just outside it. he hasn't fought in that. When was that fight? 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
I think he needs someone in the top 10 to give him a test. There's still those question marks about him, which fairly or unfairly will remain until he's had that test or he's proven himself at this level. But yeah, no, I couldn't imagine him in with Froch at the moment. I think what Froch is saying is that he hasn't done anything to deserve it is true, and I still think that he's. I mean, if you look at that fight, some of those punches at Kessler, and without wanting to go into it too much at this point in the show, that could you imagine George Groves in that kind of fight? Maybe he'd surprise us. Maybe he'd be.
Yeah, maybe he's the fresher
as equally
man.
You
just don't know, do you, until that happens. It's about timing, isn't it? And there'll be a time where Froch is on the slide and where Groves is hitting his peak.
Yeah.
And it'll be down to Groves to get the timing right, really, and Froch to get the timing wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, interesting. I think for Groves, I mean, you mentioned Stieglitz, who did look really impressive against Arthur Abraham. I think they're probably going to fight a third time. But, I mean, what about Abraham for Groves?
Yeah, Abraham would be good. And I think you mentioned, didn't you say on Saturday night, Brian McGee as well would be a good...
Yeah, as a measuring stick. But the thing is, I don't know about McGee. I certainly haven't spoken to Froch and Kessler's people this over the last 7 days. They seem to think that Brian has lost his absolute hunger like he once had, and maybe the Kessler body shots, I think it might have been Rob McCracken who said the Kessler body shots that stopped McGee, I think having been hurt to the body against Lucien Boutte late on in that fight and then hurt to the body early on against Kessler, I think Brian I don't think it was the Brian McGee of old who went down and out against Mikkel Kessler. So, I mean, if Brian can get himself mentally prepared and ready for a big fight, then I think he and Groves could have a good match. And I mean, Groves, like I said, then you got the measuring stick. You can see what Froch did to McGee, albeit years and years ago, and what Kessler did to McGee slightly more recently, and Lucien Boutte too. Because give Brian McGee plenty of credit. He's one of those guys who really goes under the radar. There's a few in British boxing like that. John Simpson, Michael Sprott spring to mind, but McGee sort of been everywhere, fought everyone, and always given a good account of himself, apart from, obviously the Kessler fight, which was a stunning result for Kessler to be able to get rid of McGee in 3 rounds. So, I think McGee or Abraham would be decent fights. If you were looking in order, you'd look for, obviously, McGee first, then Abraham, and then maybe Stieglitz. And then, obviously, if Groves was to win a world title, then him and Froch would become a real certainty, I think, in terms of them going for having a unification fight.
Yeah, you wonder. I don't know. It's been mentioned. I suppose you wonder how long, if Froch is going to be around in that kind of, that path you've just plotted for George. If Froch will still be at the top, because you do. I don't know. He hates people doubting him and doubting how long he's got left. I know. He really does, and you can understand that because he looked as good as I've seen him on Saturday. But some of those punches he walks through, you just wonder how much longer this.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's one thing people saying about Carl Froch that he is in spectacular condition and looks after his body, rarely goes up above his fighting weight. And almost, there've been some parallels between his discipline and Bernard Hopkins' discipline in recent times. But obviously Hopkins is a very conservative fighter and doesn't get involved in these sort of tear-ups. And hasn't done throughout his long career. So they are two very, very different beasts.
Oh, completely.
So, but on to Froch, who... I'm pleased to say, has written our guest column this week, where he talks about finally getting the adulation that he's deserved. I mean, I'm quite pleased that I've always been an advocate of Froch. I remember in his days after ITV pulled the plug and he was on lesser stations and struggling to get big time fame in this country, big time. Struggling to get that real fame and notoriety, or fame, just fame really, and the respect for the fights he was having. And I just think it's nice for him to have finally been arrived. I just think maybe it was a couple of years too late. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think Froch is now where he could have been 2 years or 2 years ago, or do you think it's partly because of the journey he's been on that means he's finally sort of revelling in the adulation now?
I think it's a bit of both. I do think it's the journey as well, and like you say, nobody deserves it more than Carl Froch. He really has done everything that's been asked of him. He's never taken an easy fight. with the possible exception of Yusuf Mak in recent years, and he's right up there with the world's most entertaining fighters pound for pound, and one of the best fighters pound for pound, I believe now. I think he's proven it. I think if you look at the roll call of what he's done, he's got to. There's not many other fighters in the world scene who've consistently been in with the best in their division and performed like Carl has.
So Saturday night, pretty amazing night. I mean, what was the absolute high point for you in the arena?
Well, obviously the fight itself. I think round 8, round 12 were memorable rounds. But I think Carl's ring walk was a bit of a spine tingler, wasn't it? And then
Welcome to the Jungle.
Yeah,
brilliant, wasn't it?
yeah. I mean, the whole evening was fantastic, and I just felt very lucky to be there, and so involved in the action in the lead up as well. Brilliant night.
Did you like spending some time with Joe Egan?
Joe Egan was hilarious. He was hilarious.
Go on. So for those who don't know, Big Joe Egan is he's got a level of fame and notoriety partly for his walk-on fight cameos in films and also partly because he was Mike Tyson's sparring partner for a while back in the Catskill days, and he sort of stayed in touch with Tyson since, and who Tyson infamously called once the toughest white man on the planet.
That was it, yeah.
And so Joe sort of traded off that name ever since. But what was Joe telling us on Saturday night?
Well, he's kind of. It seems like he's made a bit of a transition into the glitzy world of films. But I think he mentioned 10 or 15 films, and he's going into detail about how he's been killed off in each of them.
He's talking about the best ways he's died, wasn't he?
Best ways he's died.
The best people to kill him.
Yeah, but it was a conversation that was. I think the boxing was taking place at the time, but it was incredibly incredibly entertaining what he was saying and the way he was saying it. And then I'm sure he won't mind us saying he was then on the phone to his sweetheart as well, wasn't he? And telling her about all these various other things. And apparently she's quite proud of him now, turning up in these films and dying. Didn't he say he's making a move to America or something?
Possibly, yeah. I think he's got hopes to get over there. I think he wants to do a bit more over here before going over there.
He could do his seeing the finishing credits in one of these films though.
Yeah, definitely. Also there, who else was there? There was Gary Lineker was behind us, wasn't he? Right behind us.
Yeah.
A couple of EastEnders people. I couldn't tell you.
Shane Ritchie and Max Branning, and another one, a younger guy, and there was Timothy Spall.
Oh yeah.
And his son, who's also an actor. So yeah, it was all quite. I think, as you said in the blog that we were putting together between us, it was all pretty surreal, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then Wayne Rooney was in the dressing room with Carl Froch getting him ready, and they sort of smiled and did a bit for a camera there. And in fact, Froch talks about that in his column this week. It was a bit of a roller coaster, wasn't it? The whole night. We'll pick up more on the fight and actually how it broke down after we've had a little word from our sponsors, shall we?
William Hill, sponsors of the Opening Bell podcast. Bet £25 and get a £25 bet free. Okay,
so we've gone through the fighters who were there. We've gone through the ring entrance. It was an incredible atmosphere. Michael Buffer was there, sort of triggered the pandemonium with the "Let's get ready to rumble," didn't he? And the fans were lapping up every bit of it. Froch Kessler, though, it was a fighter's fight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it delivered. Basically, it was a box office fight, and there'd been a few duds. Klitschko didn't take off. Harrison was a dud. There'd been a few of late that haven't really been value for money as such. And Froch and Kessler, the reason why it was pay-per-view was because people knew it was going to be a good fight. And it kind of shows that how easy it can be to make a good fight or to make a successful pay-per-view. You just put on good fights. It should be that easy, shouldn't it?
Should be, and it's interesting. I'll be interested to see what the numbers are, what it did, because it was a brilliant fight, and also Carl Froch perhaps now a household name, but you could argue that he wasn't quite at that level of fame when this fight was.
Yeah, it wasn't where David Hay was.
No, exactly. It's not David Hay and Audley Harrison. So Froch and Kessler, comparatively to some of the other guys you mentioned, not as well known, but put on a much better fight, and certainly showed the sport in a far better light than those other fights as well. That's boxing at its best.
Did you think that we would get a fight like that?
Yeah, I did. I think when we mentioned it last week, didn't we? And I said that. I mean, I thought that Kessler wouldn't show as much as he did. I didn't think it would be as entertaining as the first fight. I didn't think it'd be as two-sided as the first fight. But I thought for as long as it lasted, it would be entertaining because these guys just give 100% every single time. It surpassed my expectations.
I think even Kessler surpassed Froch's expectations. He said that he wasn't expecting. Maybe Froch had listened to everyone saying, "Oh, maybe Kessler's eye, shoulder injuries, and it was 3 years ago. He hasn't boxed in the Premier League since. Which is what Rob McCracken was saying to get in Kessler's head. Maybe there was a bit of, maybe Froch was just a bit, almost resting on his laurels a bit. It's hard to think when you see how hard he trains and how hard he spars, but you never know, do you? These are little things that get planted in your subconscious, aren't they? The same way Kessler would have wanted to prove the doubters wrong from all the people asking him the questions, like, "Oh, are you the same fighter?" and all the rest of it. Yeah. So I think there's that element to it. But I've got to say, like you, and like Carl, I was surprised by Kessler. Pleasantly surprised. I thought in the later rounds he actually looked quite nimble and moving around on his feet. And Froch says he was pivoting around and he did look really, really good, and certainly not like someone who was on his last legs. Some people were of the impression, because Froch had routed Lucien Boutte and then done a number on Youssef Mack, that form would just continue, and maybe it did for the first 3 rounds. Maybe he sort of did pick up from where he left off, but then little by little Kessler came back into it, and there were some really tight rounds that were hard to score, weren't there?
Yeah, it was. Some of it was really hard to score, and it's interesting what you say then. It's very true. It was almost as if, from the point when this fight was announced, and it was it was always sold as a 50-50 fight. Quite clearly, the perceptions of it was that it wasn't a 50. It kind of went from maybe 55-45 to Froch to up to fight time. It was almost like 90-10 that Froch was going to win, but it snowballed, and somebody would say, "Oh, Kessler's only fought 13 rounds." Somebody else would say something else. I remember when I went to the open training session last week, and then all of a sudden, "Oh, he looks drawn. He looks tired. Oh, his legs are so thin." Then we go to the weigh-in, and at the weigh-in, Froch comes out. Froch is waiting to get on the scales, and there's a delay from Kessler. And then everybody's like, "Oh, he can't make weight. It's a struggle." And all of a sudden, these things, not necessarily through fact, just snowball out of control. So by the time the fight started, Kessler was a virtual no-hoper with a lot of people.
It's brilliant the way it's a big fight when people like that. It's like, "Oh, Kessler's coming a pound under the weight," which is what he was, and you think, "Oh, he's misjudged it. He's misjudged it." I spoke to Froch about that on the night. Actually, I said, "Did it surprise you in coming in so light?" And he's like, "It's so light. It's a pound. It's negligible." But people were so used to people hitting the weight and being right up there, like 11-13. If someone's coming at 11-12. And a veteran like Kessler, people are like, "Ooh, what's he done?" Yeah. But clearly, I mean, one thing you could say is maybe he did come in a fraction lighter, because where he was nimble and he showed his boxing ability later on, maybe that was part of the strategy, just coming a little bit lighter, so he's a little bit more fluid.
Yeah.
So, did Kessler get the tactics wrong at all?
I think his tactics were pretty good, to be honest with you. From my
it was a slow start.
That's exactly what I was about to say. He started slow. I think I gave Froch definitely the first 3, maybe even the first 4. And then Kessler looked like he was going to take over around, well, he did take over, but then he seemed to relinquish that momentum again. So if he'd have made a faster start, then perhaps he would have banked an extra couple of rounds, and the whole thing would have been far, far closer. But I thought Froch was exceptional. When he's in that kind of form against someone like Kessler, he's barely, with those levels of fitness, the way he walked through some of the shots, it's awe-inspiring. There's no other way to describe it. It's absolutely awe-inspiring.
Okay, so on balance, you were satisfied by the decision, unanimous decision for Froch?
I was, yeah. I thought Froch had done it. I thought Kessler looked the better schooled, but there wasn't enough for me. There wasn't enough moments of sustained success where he looked like he'd actually taken over.
That's us putting our thumbs up to the to our digital guy who is reminding us to take a break for William Hill, which we've already done.
Yeah, we've already done that. So yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But yeah, no, I thought the result was fair.
What about the 118-110 scorecard from Adelaide Bird?
Yeah, it's funny. I was speaking to Mickey Van about a score like with the score 118-110, and if you kind of put it into context, all it takes is 2 or 3 close rounds that you give to the same fighter, and a 115-113 card becomes 118-110 card. 118-110 was too wide, in my opinion. However, my impression of it was that it was a close fight, but I went back and tallied up my card. I had it 117-111 for Froch. I wouldn't have argued with anybody who'd have had it as tight as 115-113.
Yeah.
It was that kind of fight where each round was really close. Particularly during some of the middle stages.
Yeah, it was 4-6, 4-7 that really seemed to be up for grabs for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. And if you kind of if one punch kind of decided it for you, and then your own personal opinion, then fair enough. But I can see why 118-110 wouldn't look like a fair representation of the fight.
Round 11, Froch was under the cosh. Were you concerned that he might be on his way out?
No,
you and I both. I mean, Kessler seems to think that he nearly had him, and he just couldn't quite finish up. But for me, I don't know. Froch is one of those guys who's just so sturdy, isn't it? It almost makes you wonder how Jermaine Taylor put him down, with the shots he stood up to on Saturday night. But obviously only takes one good shot at the right spot. But yeah, I didn't have any sort of fears about him dropping in round 11 either.
No, he was aware of it, and he said afterwards, didn't he, that he'd been hurt several times. I mean, grief, I'm not surprised. But no, it didn't look to me like he was in danger of losing the fight at that point.
What about round 12? Did you think he almost had Kessler out of there?
I thought Kessler was in more trouble in the 12th than Carl was in the 11th.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. The referee looked like he was going to jump in, didn't he? Right at the end. But I spoke to Froch about this, and Kessler said afterwards as well that actually Froch thinks that he hit Kessler low by mistake, and then the referee was going to go in and break and say, no, hang on, it's a low shot.
Okay.
But then Froch poured on the pressure, Kessler was covering up, and the referee just let it play out.
Right.
Which is an interesting school of thought. Perhaps it was because, Kessler was going, that maybe he was thinking about it. I mean, we've seen it numerous times where referees think about intervening, then they sort of motion to do it and then think, no, hang on. So, yeah, it's tough. It's hard to know, isn't it? It's hard to know how close a referee is to stepping in. But on balance, though, I agree with you. Froch, worthy winner. And I just think it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes from here.
Yeah.
I mean, would you, if you were Froch's promoter or manager, would you be keen to make a third fight with Kessler?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're made for each other, aren't they? In a boxing ring, you could. I mean, not every trilogy is Ali Frazier or Ward Gatti, but there's every chance that Froch Kessler could kind of follow in those footsteps with the action involved. I think,
and it's 1-1, so
exactly, and it's poised, and a rubber match when the first 2 contests of that entertaining, a rubber match is almost a natural.
Sells itself.
But whether those guys will want to get into, I don't doubt. Well, I'm sure they would, but just thinking of oh my God, I've got to do that again. I've got to fight that guy again. But they're boxers, aren't they? They're fighters.
So look, Carl Froch has listed in the magazine this week 5 guys that he can imagine himself fighting. So let's start from 5 down. Jean-Pascal Rematch. Can you see that happening? Would that appeal to you? Carl said that he wouldn't go up to light heavyweight, but perhaps they could do it at catchweight because he's always promised Pascal a rematch.
Yeah, I can't see it happening, to be honest. I'm not sure if Pascal could get down to the kind of catch rate that Froch would need him to. I don't know. It would. I think it'd be an excellent fight. The first one was brilliant, but I'd fancy if they could get to, say, I don't know, 170 pounds or something. I'd pick Froch to win that one.
Okay. Now, at 4, we've got Robert Stieglitz, the WBO champion, who looked very impressive against Arthur Abraham. I think Stieglitz, in many ways, it makes a fair bit of sense for Froch from a career standpoint, in the sense that he would feasibly possibly be adding a WBO title to his WBA and IBF belts, although the WBA title is the regular championship, is there, not the super championship that Andre Ward's got. But so you'd have the WBO title if he was to win. And Sauerland and Eddie Hearn both seem open to the idea of working together again, and Stieglitz is with Sauerland. So I think there's scope to do that. But would Sky want that fight on box office? And is there any way back from Carl to come off Sky box office now he's already been on there?
That was my problem with this fight. I don't think it'd necessarily be a hard sell if you placed it somewhere like in Nottingham in terms of the live gate, but I think it's a huge step down, and I don't mean that to be, disparaging to Stieglitz at all, but it's a huge step down from Kessler Rematch. I think maybe in his heart of hearts, Froch would think it was a bit of a step down as well, despite the belts. And maybe it does give him if he was to beat Stieglitz and then go off into a fight with Ward, he's literally more or less cleaned out the division, hasn't he? Before he goes off into the fight with Ward, so perhaps it would make the fight with Ward down the line a bit more appealing, but for me, out of these names on this list, Stieglitz is the one that stands out as the least appealing. Although, however, having said that, the fight itself might be pretty good. Might be a nice match of styles. More likely to catch fire than against some of the slippery guys on this.
Yeah.
Coming
up to slippery names, the next one seems like it's not a bad outside bet for happening. Both sides have made some noise about it in the last few weeks, and it's Bernard Hopkins, the light heavyweight record breaker, who has mentioned that he'd be willing to meet Froch at catchweight. And obviously Hopkins has got previous having fought Joe Calzaghe, and so that would appeal to a British audience, you'd imagine. What about it, Matt?
I quite like that fight. I don't. Let's face it. It's not going to be Froch Kessler. It's not going to be entertaining like that. But I really like that fight, and I like it. That Froch, looking at his legacy and moving forward, and I'd like to think Froch would really take the fight to Bernard. The only thing, perhaps, is that you mentioned earlier Calzaghe. He's someone like Froch. He's kind of walking down this path that was trodden quite a few years ago now, actually, with Kessler and then Hopkins.
Definitely. Okay. So then we've already talked about the Kessler rematch. I mean, I'd say that there's probably already some kind of negotiations about that now. If Mikhail Kessler fights Carl Froch again, does it have to be on neutral territory?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's not always a fair world that we live in, but I think they were both. The fight over in Denmark, Kessler got that. Froch won it in Britain. They were both close fights. So let's and also this fight has it hasn't just caught the imagination here. All over the world have been absolutely in awe of that fight. They really enjoyed that fight. Let's stick it in Las Vegas. Let's show him how to stick a really, really good action fight on there.
I think if you did that, you'd have to have something as a co-feature, wouldn't you?
Of course you would,
some
yeah.
Sort of local talent or some American star or something.
Of course you would. I mean, more than likely it would end up, I don't know, in Europe somewhere, wouldn't it?
Maybe you could do something like an Andre Ward Pascal semi-final or something.
Yeah, that'd be
Pascal's
good,
tied
wouldn't
up, but something like
Yeah,
that. Maybe you could
yeah.
do the semi-finals and put a final, but then it's kind of like a mini Super Six all over.
Yeah.
So and then at number 1 of the list, we've got Froch's favoured opponent, and that would be Andre Ward in the UK. Again, what's the value in Froch taking this fight away from the UK?
What's the value in taking it away from the UK?
Yeah. Should Froch, should it be a big deal that Froch wants it in the UK?
Well, of course he should want it in the UK. He deserves it in the UK. And it's, I don't know, he's a huge draw here. I don't think it wouldn't be the same event if it was in America. Andre Ward isn't. He's still, despite his vast ability, he's not a massive star. And perhaps he should be, but it's slightly off subject. This fight, I wouldn't. If I was Froch and Froch's team, I don't know whether I'd be chasing Ward so passionately.
This win over Kessler, is it the best win of Froch's career?
I'm not sure. Probably performance-wise, put it all together, it would be. But I think because I would say, like I said earlier, probably 90%, if not more, expected Carl to win this fight. You still go back to that Lucien Boutte fight for me, which is one of his best performances. Although now it looks like it was an easy night's work, let's not forget that I would say probably less than half of experts thought that Froch would win. I wasn't naming any names, Tris.
You didn't need to, pal.
But it's true though, and I think when you look at best performances, if you put it, the performance against Kessler on Saturday night was probably his most complete.
Yeah.
But in terms of going in and fighting someone who's perceived to be the best and upsetting the odds, then perhaps Boutte was his best performance.
My personal thoughts on Froch Andre Ward is I think Ward won the first fight by such significant margins that it's only interesting if you stack the deck a little more in Froch's favour.
Yeah.
That's probably something Ward won't be prepared to do, and I found Ward's, as I've written in my column, Ward's comments after the fight quite amusing, to be honest, because he was talking like he's the big shot, and he is. I mean, look, Andre Ward, brilliant fighter, one of the top 2 or 3 best on the planet, but he's run out of options, and I know that it sounds like Eddie Hearn's prepared to be very bullish in negotiations with them, because what does Andre Ward bring to the table? He's not bringing a massive fan base, he's not bringing pay-per-view in certainly in the USA. He's not, I just can't see that, and it's not a massive appealing fight. I mean, I think Andre Ward was talking about Wembley. I think it's a joke.
Yeah.
I can't see them shifting sort of 70, 80,000 seats. Maybe they could do it at the county ground, the Notts Forest ground, but would Ward really go into the Lions' Den into Nottingham? I can't see that.
I don't know. He does seem to have a bit of old school, that old school desire to prove himself about him. I think if it was just up to him, maybe he would come over, and I'm sure he must be aware of he must think he's completely head and shoulders above any of the guys, and he'll be relishing a bit of a challenge. But whether it will happen, I don't know. And like you say, although I think 2 scorecards had it 115, 113, or maybe all 3. I can't remember. They were really, although on paper it was a close fight. When you watched it, it didn't have the air of a close fight. And when you've got, on a much smaller scale, but say for example when Chad Dawson beat Antonio Tarver fairly convincingly, and then they made the rematch. Those rematches really they're a hard sell. Froch has got that determination in him, which will make it an easier sell, but it's still a fight where I think you'd struggle to find anybody that would realistically give Carl anything more than a puncher's chance in that fight. What
do you think of Andre Ward saying that the fight in Atlantic City was a road fight for him, that he was on the road?
Oh yeah, it's well, I suppose he was on the road to an extent, wasn't he? It wasn't on his doorstep, but he was in his country. It was a throwaway comment really. That just ignore it.
Okay, Matt. So what? I mean, coming out of the fight, I mean, it was a breathless occasion, wasn't it? Everyone was sort of excited. I looked up weren't many times I looked up either away from my iPad, my laptop, my notepad, or looking at the ring. But when I did look up, it was amazing to see people in sort of rounds 8, 10 and 12. And, you know, it was hard to see people who sat down.
Yeah, I know. It was an unforgettable night. It was an unforgettable night. And I was reading this morning, Colin Murray, who does some stuff for the BBC and has done this, and he has his column, I think it's in the Metro, which is like a free newspaper that I sometimes pick up on the train, and he said he'd never experienced anything like it. He said he's been to countless sporting events, countless music festivals, but he's never experienced an atmosphere like that fight. And it didn't stop from the moment that Froch made his entrance.
Yeah.
It didn't stop until the end.
It was, I mean, I know that they were, you know, you can come up with a lot of cliches, but they were obviously gladiators, Froch and Kessler, that night, and always have been, really. But the O2 was something of a coliseum as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, people wanted what they saw, wasn't it? That's why they're all there. That's why the tickets sold so fast, because people thought it was going to be a great fight, and that's in essence surely what pay-per-view, box office, and all that should be about, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, too often you see pay-per-views where there's like an A-sider against a guy who's either a hype job or got not much hope and stuff. But it's very rare that you can get two top-tier guys in with one another, and you know that the styles will blend and everything else. I'm not saying that people like Floyd Mayweather shouldn't be on pay-per-view, different things like that, but you also know what you're going to get. You know, if you match Floyd with a lesser opponent, you know what you're going to get. You know, you're going to get a one-sided beatdown. But with Froch and Kessler, there was really not too much danger of that happening.
No, not at all. And it was. But then it kind of has it set the bar too high. What's the next? Feasibly, what is the next pay-per-view?
What's the next Everest for Froch? You
Not
know,
necessarily for Froch, but where the Sky would back a fight to this level.
It's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. I mean, obviously hugely topical at the time. And then there was another side note from Saturday night, and you texted me when you got back, and you were having some issues with the website, which I rectified in the morning. But when you got home, I was still in the arena.
Yeah, I went off. I'm not sure what time I got back. It certainly wasn't early. I know all the pubs are closed. That much is for sure. But I think I got back. I was quite lucky. About 1:30.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then I did some work for an hour, and then texted you, and you said you were sitting. It was about 2:45 or something in the morning, wasn't it? When you were
it was quite funny actually. It was at the post-fight press conference, and Froch needed some butterfly stitches above his left eye. They didn't need to be stitched in the end, but he just had the plasters done. And we were all all the media were waiting for quite a long time. I remember one guy from the British press, who I won't name, said, "Bloody hell, I can't believe Carl's keeping us waiting." And I was like, you know, I just can't understand how anyone could think like that. You know, he's kept you maybe 20 minutes longer than you might have done, but give him a break. So anyway, but that's the mindset. Anyway, Froch came out, spent some time with the media. I got some one-to-one time with both him and Rob McCracken that you can see in the mag this week, although a lot of the stuff from the mag has come from my phone conversations with Carl over Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. And yeah, I mean, and then Carl and Rob stayed, and then they asked the questions, did a few one-to-ones, and then they disappeared. And then it got to 2:15. I did an interview for iFilm London with Coog and Cassius, and then I did something for Fraser Dainton on Sky Sports News. And I was so bleary-eyed, I was shattered, and they said, "Kessler's coming out now."
Oh.
And so I think I left the arena by 3, home by 5, up with the kids at 6:30. And here I am today.
Survived to tell the tale.
Yeah,
but there was. I know there was a few people kind of complaining though about things, because there's a lot of people stranded because it started late, didn't it? It didn't start late, but it started comparatively late to shows that take place at this venue. And the last train, I think, for people wanting to get back towards the central London was 12:20, and at that point, the fight's in mid-flow, isn't it? There's no chance of getting that. There's no chance of getting that last train, and there's a few people outside when I left, that were just grumbling and complaining about the fact that they're kind of been the scheduling of the event.
You can't please all the people all the time, can you?
Absolutely not. I do know this.
So look, we're looking ahead now just to this week. Is there anything else you want to say, by the way, on Frochcast?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, just looking ahead to this week, the main fight that we've got is Martin Gethin against Ahmad Diaz. It's something of a surprise shot for Gethin, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a real surprise that Gethin has done this. I've just got something up on the website today about it actually, and I think that he had 75 amateur fights and he didn't win half of them. And he has progressed, but I've seen him a few times in the last couple of years, and he's proper. The way he's gone back and he's really learnt his trade, and I think he deserves this chance, and I'm delighted that he's got this chance.
Sometimes you get these Cinderella stories where a fighter who you'd like to have a chance gets it and makes the most of it, don't you?
Yeah, I think he's got every chance as well against Diaz. He's a seasoned operator. He'll certainly bring more world experience. I think he's fought all over the world.
Well, Diaz's record is 31-11, so it's spotty at best. I mean, if you look back at some of his more recent fights, I mean, he got chinned by Ji-Hoon Kim in a round back in 2010.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kim's not a A-lister by any stretch. You know,
No.
he sort of found his level at maybe a sort of C level. He was in fun fights. But then he beat Lenny Zapavinga, didn't he? Which is a good win for Diaz.
That's a really good result.
And then lost on Miguel Vasquez on points, which there's no disgrace in that, is there?
No, but it makes you wonder who else is in the IBF lightweight top 10 if Gethin and Diaz are fighting for an eliminator. But yeah, like you say, this is a really winnable fight for Gethin.
He's been in a lot of fun fights. But you were at his most recent fight, weren't you?
Has he fought? He hasn't fought since Johansson.
You were at the Johansson fight, that's for sure, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that
I was at the Johansson.
That was at the Deborah show,
Ben
wasn't
Murphy.
it?
I wasn't at the Ben Murphy fight. No.
Okay. No. But yeah, Johansson, you were impressed with him, weren't you? It was a great fight.
Yeah, that was a Frank Warren dinner show.
The Deborah charity.
Yeah, and it was brilliant fight that was. Real two-way action. But Gethin he's got a very, very sturdy jaw, very durable, can work his way into fights, and then once he gets going, there's almost no stopping him.
Yeah.
And I was impressed with him against Murphy as well. Kind of gave Murphy a chance of winning that. But
I remember when Gethin came on the scene, he took Nadeem Sadiq's unbeaten record, didn't he? And then he beat John Fuchs, and he took his unbeaten record. And Fuchs was a hot prospect at the time. But then the wheels came off, and he lost to Scott Lawton and John Watson in consecutive fights. And it's only been really the last year or so that Gethin's rebuilt in that quality with beating Johansson and Ben Murphy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is there a danger that this is a step too far for him, because and again I've got the utmost respect for every boxer, but Murphy, Johansson, and it's a fairly shot worn Johansson as well, and he was taking a lot of shots from Johansson. He kind of broke Johansson's heart almost in that. With the shots that he was standing up to, is this then a step that's going to be a bit too much for him? Do you think? Yeah,
it could well be. I mean, you know, he's got the fight at Walsall, so that helps, as we've mentioned. You know, he's got home advantage. The fight's going to be on Box Nation. And it's his big chance. It's all or nothing for him, isn't it? I mean, he can't leave anything to chance. Can't leave anything. He's got to leave it all in the ring, hasn't he? I know it's an old cliche, but he's really got to go in there and just give it his best shot, hasn't he? And that's all he can do. I think he's got a chance. You know, Diaz's form so patchy. I think he's going to have a chance. But I do ultimately think that Diaz has been in. You know, look at Diaz. You know, apart from the guys I mentioned, he's done 12 rounds with Ryan Guzman. He's been in with some top operators, and I think he should know just enough to get by Martin Gethin, maybe stop him late, or certainly earn a points decision.
It's interesting. I'm not sure. I think I'd pick Gethin. I think I would. But he's gonna have to. He's gonna have to show more than he has as yet. But having said that, he's done it a few times where he has shown more than he's done before.
Yeah.
I think he improved from the Johansson fight to the Murphy fight, and a similar level of improvement might be enough here for Diaz.
Okay, just in closing, we'll go back to the main topic of the show, and it's Carl Froch. So if you could pick one opponent and one venue, who would Froch fight next and where?
He would fight Mikkel Kessler in the MGM Grand.
Okay, and I would go for Mikkel Kessler in Amsterdam, in neutral territory, and then I would say he tries to get Andre Ward over to Nottingham in May for a summer showdown in a football stadium.
Yeah. I mean, I think I perhaps kind of I said things about the Andre Ward fight. I think from Carl's point of view, I completely understand why that's where he wants to go. He's now only one man on his record that he hasn't beaten, and it's still the best fight. It's still the best fight for Andre Ward in the super middleweight division is a rematch with Carl Froch.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Matt, well, thanks for your time this week, and thanks a lot for tuning in, downloading the podcast, and we'll be back next week.
Get involved with all the best boxing banter at our forum, and that's forum.boxingnewsonline.net.